A catering to the weakness and wickedness of human nature. Occupation infamous and murderous. A woman who has obtained unenviable notoriety in the police courts. Anne Lohman was considered a notorious evil figure in 19th century New York, as depicted in the picture on the right from a 19th century newspaper. She was an English immigrant who offered female reproductive services, including abortion pills, surgical abortion, boarding houses, adoption, and contraceptive services. Lohman was publicly attacked by moral reformers and medical professionals who sought to stop her, and even most historians have only depicted her as her notorious public alias, Madame Restal, and used words such as evil villain and wicked to describe her life. Through my research, I argue that she was not this notorious figure, and instead, she defied societal standards to make important contributions to the growing public discussion on female reproduction and sexuality. First, she discussed family control in her advertisements. Second, she sought to normalize the idea of abortion. And third, she defied ideals of womanhood. The most important resources I used to support my argument were her advertisements in newspapers like the New York Herald and the Sun, court proceedings against her, and the overall environment in 19th century New York. I used these in an attempt to reclaim and reposition her as a female health advocate, or one who offered reproductive services so that women could have greater control over their own health. Lohman likely operated her business from 1838 until her death in 1878. She largely appealed to white, wealthy, married women who sought to control the size of their families. In fact, in one of her ads in the New York Sun, she questioned whether it was moral for parents to increase the size of their families regardless of how it affected themselves or their other children. Lohman strongly resisted the expectations society placed on her and other women. She defied ideals of womanhood that restricted women to domestic and passive roles in society. Her services empowered women who didn't want or couldn't handle a child and sought to normalize the idea of abortion. Her services also meant that women didn't have to go through more dangerous methods to procure an abortion. Lohman was a significant figure in developing support for women's reproductive rights. Abortion and contraception have been subjects that have been under contention throughout history and have continued to do so. And much of their contentious origins have originated during Lohman's career. Women who advocate for reproductive rights, similar to Lohman, have been and are continually being denounced. As I'm sure you've heard before, history repeats itself, and the topic of abortion will no doubt be relevant for years to come. Thank you.
Questions for Karli? Yes, Virginia.
Did Margaret Sanger mention her predecessor here in the...
It's a good question. So yes, Anne Lohman was pretty much a century before Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger actually wasn't as much of a fan of abortion, just more for women's reproductive rights as a whole and the birth control movement and clinics. She did not directly mention Anne Lohman that I know of, but I would definitely argue Lohman had an influence on Sanger's involvement.
Yes. How did she die?
How did she die? She actually committed suicide. She had multiple court cases against her throughout her lifetime, and this court case was against a law that a moral reformer had against her based on illegal literature or obscene literature, which is very broad. Basically, she was offering information pamphlets on contraception and was caught, and her trial was set to begin. It was April 1st, and she committed suicide the day it was supposed to start.
Why don't we know her name? Well, I did. Maybe others do, but I didn't know her name. So why is she lesser known?
I guess, well, she was known a lot as Madame Restal.
Okay.
That was the name she used for her business, and the notoriety surrounding her is under that name. I guess, I don't know. I mean, she's one of the most well-known 19th century practitioners of abortion. I guess through the process of the contention around abortion, at this point it wasn't necessarily illegal throughout, and it wasn't as religious-based, so maybe through that change she kind of got lost.
Yes.
Was she a doctor? When you say practiced, was she a doctor?
She had midwifery training. In the 19th century, it was kind of the beginning of medical education, standardizing it, and so it was not a requirement then, and she did not go to medical school or anything like that.
All right. Thank you very much.